Good morning. I'm Heidi Shoup, President of the World Affairs Council, Washington, D.C. And on behalf of the Council and the Africa Society, I welcome you here today to explore and learn about Africa, a continent for the 21st century. The World Affairs Council's mission is to engage as many Americans as possible with a better understanding of the critical issues of our time, of your time, in order that the next generations of Americans will thrive in an interconnected world much different from the 20th century, the world in which I grew up in. Africa is in the midst of a powerful transition, but American perceptions have not kept up with the realities of change. Too often, disease, famine, war have been the descriptive words that jump to mind when we hear the word Africa. But Africa is a complex place, 54 countries, spread over 8 dramatically different geographical regions, over 1,000 languages, and 800 million people and counting. And in those countries exists a wide variation of development, economic growth, representative governments, education, health, and peoples. So we need to be careful when we talk about Africa and make sure that we understand the enormity of the situations and relationships there. That's one thing we need to know. Second thing we need to remember is that Africa is the world's youngest continent. 70% of the population are under 30, and 1 in 5 are between 15 and 24, your age. This human factor has enormous implications for governments across the continent, and we will hear about that later today in the workshops. U.S. interaction with the countries of Africa, and sub-Saharan Africa in particular, has historically been aid and emergency relief efforts. Yet today, the African continent is home to some of the fastest growing economies. Africa has a bright future, a future that many of you may be involved with through education, work, or travel. This week, we celebrate the 15th Annual International Education Week, sponsored by the Departments of State and Education. It highlights the benefits of global learning and student exchange. Knowing more about other countries and about global issues of our time is more important than ever. In a statement marking the International Education Week, the Honorable John Kerry, Secretary of State, noted that global education is a core component of our diplomacy, and I quote, "We see how vital it is that young people absorb what true international education teaches, how to think critically of the importance of civility and a willingness to respond to contrary opinions with hard questions, not bitter denials or an insistence on dogma." End quote. We are honored that the Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs, Linda Thomas Greenfield, is with us today to deliver the keynote address. The District of Columbia and the Washington, D.C. areas have many connections to the countries in Africa, from the embassies here in Washington, D.C., to trade, visitors, and to sister city relationships with 4 African capital cities. To mark the importance of this day, D.C. Mayor Vincent Gray has issued a decree making this Youth Forum Day in the District of Columbia. We have planned a full program, so I'll turn to my colleague, Bernadette Paola, Director of the Africa Society, and she will introduce our keynote speaker. Thank you all for being with us today.
Thank you, Heidi. Good morning. That was a lame good morning. Get up. All of you stand up. Stand up. All right, now I want you to give yourselves an applause for making it through the rain and get excited about today. Come on. Great. You may be seated now. I'm the president of the Africa Society of the National Summit on Africa. And you may wonder what that is, and I'll tell you. We educate Americans of all ages about the continent of Africa, about its economies, its challenges, and its promise and potential, and that's why you're here. We made an investment in you today. We made an investment in terms of the top people in their fields coming to talk to you. Linda Thomas Greenfield is in charge of all the Africa policy for the United States at the Department of State. And despite all of that and traveling everywhere, she found the time to come. Ambassador Fida Matifu is the ambassador for the Democratic Republic of Congo. She was, as you'll see in your programs, the chair of the African Diplomatic Corps. Tammy Hultman is the co-founder of allafrica.com, and I want you in the mornings to look at allafrica.com, which she started, which is the largest content provider of Africa in the United States. They're here to see you today. They're here to invest their time and energy because we believe in you. And not only because we believe in you, because we need you. You know, when you think of the themes of today, peace and security, and health, and trade and investment, and food and agriculture, and all the things that you'll be discussing today. You know, when you get up in the morning and you hear the news, the tendency is to be depressed because you hear about evil and you hear about the bad things that are going on. But for every bad thing, just know this: no one can stop you from doing good. Among you may be the next president. Among you may be the next a doctor who works in Doctors Without Borders, or an entrepreneur, or something great. You might not see yourselves like that right now, and that's one of the purposes of this program right now. We want you to take yourself seriously, and don't strive for mediocrity, but greatness. Now, I have the distinct honor of introducing to you the Honorable Linda Thomas Greenfield. All the bios are in your program, so you've already seen her picture, and you know that she's a top ambassador. You know that she was the Director General for the Foreign Service, and I've just told you that she's responsible for all of the countries in Africa and the policies that go toward interacting with that, U.S.-Africa relations. But this is what I'm going to tell you. She's a people person. She came here. You know, the Department of State has layers of bureaucracy, and she cut through all of those to be with you today. She was supposed to travel and has to travel, so I want you to give her a round of applause because she has been with us. She spoke to 2,000 young people in Pittsburgh at a convention center for one of our programs, and she took time for you today. And I want you to learn from her. I want you to use her as a model of what you can be in the future. Without further ado, the Honorable Linda Thomas Greenfield. Thank you.
Good morning. All right, that's a little bit better. I think you guys are finally waking up. This was not a great day to have to get outside and pile onto buses and then come in and try to get into this building in the rain and the cold. So I know you're here because you want to be here. Is that correct? Yes. All right. Well, let me tell you how delighted I am to speak with you today at the start of this incredible program, the Youth Forum that is focused on Africa. I know that you are going to have a great day. In fact, I'm envious of you and wish that I had had these kinds of opportunities when I was your age in high school and trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, but also wanting to know a bit about the world. So I'm going to talk to you today about Africa. You're going to have a whole day, so you'll learn a little bit from me today, but I think your day is going to be extraordinarily rich. In the Bureau of African Affairs, that's the part of the State Department that I lead, as you heard, our mission is to partner with Africans for democracy, for peace, and for prosperity. So I want to tell you a bit about our policy toward Africa in the 21st century, about the challenges and the opportunities facing Africa today, and about the partnership offered by the United States with Africa. More than that, however, I want to suggest 3 things that you can do, starting today and with this forum, to prepare yourself as global citizens in the 21st century. Those 3 things are to listen closely, and I think you're doing that because I can hardly hear anything but the cameras snapping. Talk to people. Listen closely, talk to people, and be engaged. If you do those three things, you're going to have amazing careers and amazing lives. So let's start with the first, listen closely. It's so easy to listen with just one ear and not really hear what the person is saying. One of my son's teachers told me that he had the capacity to listen with one ear. And I know all of you have that capacity to listen with one ear. And these days, you've got things like WhatsApp. I still couldn't figure that out. I met some young people in South Africa, and they were telling me about WhatsApp. And I'm like, what's up? And they're like, no, WhatsApp. And I'm like, what's WhatsApp? And finally, they showed me this tool that you all use. And I discovered that Facebook is no longer the in thing. When I decided I was never going to go on Facebook, now I can't ever go on Facebook because you guys are not doing Facebook anymore. You're doing WhatsApp. You're texting. I was told recently when I left a message on my son's telephone, Mom, don't leave messages. People don't do that anymore. If you want to talk to me, text me. So you guys are texting and you're WhatsApping and some of you are Google timing and FaceTiming and I don't know, everything that's going on. So there's all this stuff that you guys are doing going on around you. So you can't really hear sometimes what's happening in the world. You're not sitting down looking at the 6 o'clock news or the 7 o'clock news as we do, waiting to pick up the morning newspaper to read the headlines as I did this morning. You're picking up your cell phones, you're picking up your computers, and you're WhatsApping and Google timing and FaceTiming. Too often, the only story, however, as you're doing all this stuff, and occasionally something will pop up about Africa, and I hope you read it. But the only story that you're hearing about Africa and Africans that reaches the United States is a headline about crisis, it's about devastation, it's about tragedy. So you know the story, you've heard it. But this is not the whole story as you heard today. First of all, and you heard that earlier, Africa is not a country. Africa is a continent. And I see some of you nodding your heads. You know that. There are a few people in the United States who don't know that. They think that we have this big country filled with crisis that's called Africa. Africa has 54 countries, as you heard. Africa is a very dynamic region. It's innovative, it's resilient, and so are its people. In the State Department, we're often dealing with the crises that you hear about. Situations like the Ebola outbreak and political unrest in South Sudan, Central African Republic, Burkina Faso, the kidnapping of the Chibok girls. These are ongoing issues, and issues such as climate change and food security and the threat of violent extremism are constantly keeping us engaged. In order to address these challenges, we must listen to our colleagues working at embassies and consulates around the world who report in from the field. We also must listen closely to foreign counterparts, such as Ambassador Matifu from Congo, who's sitting here in the room, and our other foreign counterparts who are here. We must listen to the private sector, we must listen to businesses, we must listen to civil society. It is only by listening closely, asking questions, and trying to understand where people are coming from that we can move toward positive solutions to some of the crises that we see on the continent. But also, it is our way of understanding that it is not just crises, that there are real people dealing with real issues and real families who want to see their kids go to school, people who want to make a better life for themselves. Let me talk about one of the most pressing issues that we're dealing with right now, and that's the Ebola outbreak in West Africa. We're beginning to see some slight improvements in the case rate in Liberia, but Sierra Leone is seeing an exponential growth in cases, and Guinea has doubled in cases over the past 30 days. Just as I was walking out of the door, I got the bad news that the young Sierra Leonean doctor who was brought to the United States for treatment, died. This is a valiant young man in his 40s who was giving his life to helping others. And so I'd like you to join me in a moment of silence in recognition of this doctor. The United States has been involved in the Ebola response since the outbreak began. We sent specialists to the field from the CDC. We provided humanitarian aid and support from the U.S. military on logistics and training and construction of treatment facilities. Even with these efforts, President Obama made clear that this epidemic is a global challenge that demands a global response and that we need to do more. We're urging all of our partners in the international community, the United Nations, the African Union, to meet the resource needs in terms of money, international health care workers, and supplies. That is a critical part of what we do in diplomacy. The reason I say to you, listen closely in the context of the Ebola crisis is because a lot of the media stories have made it seem like this is the only thing that's happening in Africa right now. Not to minimize the suffering and the magnitude of the crisis, but as many of your presenters will tell you here today, what's happening across the continent is more complex, more dynamic, and more exciting than any news article can tell you, especially on the economic front. In order to get that information, sometimes you have to listen a little more closely and dig a little deeper. This past August, President Obama invited all African heads of state to Washington for the first ever U.S.-Africa Leaders Conference. We had 50 heads of state. We had the African Union. We had over 3,000 delegates in Washington. And if any of you had the misfortune of having to move around in the Washington area, the traffic was impossible during that week of the summit. It was a historic opportunity to enhance and deepen our cooperation on a wide range of issues with our African partners. In fact, it was an opportunity to listen to each other and talk frankly about shared priorities and shared opportunities on the continent. The summit focused heavily on our economic relationship with commitments made by U.S. companies for over $33 billion in trade and investment. A full day was dedicated to the U.S.-Africa Business Forum, bringing leaders together with CEOs to create the personal connections that are critical to a successful business relationship. Why did we focus on business and trade, you might ask? Because many of the world's fastest growing economies are on the continent of Africa. 8 of the top 10 fastest growing countries are in Africa, and that is not something you normally read in the headlines. The continent is home to a dynamic youth population and a burgeoning middle class. You heard that 70% of Africans are 25 and under, and these are young people like yourselves, young people with hopes and dreams, young people who want to change the world, young people who want to make a difference. Talking about the summit actually combines the idea of listening hard with my next recommendation to you, which is talk. Talk to people. One of the things I love most about being a diplomat, and sometimes people say that the greatest weapon that you can put in the hands of a diplomat is a microphone. Because we don't know when to stop talking when you put it in front of us. So when I start seeing you nod off, I'll know it's time for me to stop talking. But I also love having the opportunity, the chance to speak to young people like yourselves, and in fact, for me, talking to young people with an interest in Africa and international affairs is one of the things I enjoyed the most. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I grew up in a small town in Louisiana, and when I was only 12 years old, I had a special opportunity in my life, and that was to meet Peace Corps volunteers and their African teachers who were living in my very small community in Louisiana prior to their departing for their assignments in Swaziland and Somalia. And I got the opportunity to engage with these people. This was my first time ever meeting an African, despite the fact I'm of African descent. I had never met anyone directly from Africa. And from that moment, and from talking to those people, I knew I wanted to go to Africa. Didn't know how I was going to get there, but I knew I wanted to go. And I hope that some of you have moments like that today. Maybe as you are listening to your speakers and you're asking them questions and you're talking to them, that you will have that moment when you decide that this is the moment that I want to make a difference in the world and I want to travel to Africa. So whether I was serving as a refugee officer in Kenya, because I eventually went into the Foreign Service, or as the U.S. ambassador to Liberia, talking to people is what helped me do a better job. One place I distinctly remember conversations with Liberian citizens was during their election, both in 2005 and 2011, when I went out to watch as an election observer. I talked with people who waited hours in the heat, in the rain, and in the mud to cast their vote for the first time. Many of them had not voted for more than 20 years. And they had an opportunity to make their voices heard. The vast majority of Africans, some 84%, support free and fair elections. We share this view that every citizen deserves the chance to cast his or her vote in a free, fair, and most importantly, peaceful process. You have that right when you make 18, so please use it. 72% of Africans believe that democracy is preferable to any other form of government, and 77% reject one-party rule. 77% reject one-party rule. Between now and the end of 2016, 14 countries on the African continent will have presidential elections, including Nigeria, which is scheduled for February 2015. That's why strengthening democratic institutions and supporting good governance remains one of the top priorities of the Bureau of African Affairs. It's a top strategic priority for us. In the Bureau of African Affairs, we try to talk to young people on the continent as much as possible. In fact, right before the Leaders Conference in August, we held another African Summit with 500 of Africa's most talented and inspiring young people, people like yourselves. This was the culmination of a 6-week training and leadership program that these young people had participated in called the Mandela Washington Fellowship, which is a flagship program of the Obama administration, the Young African Leaders Initiative, or YALI. Through YALI, we are reaching out to young people across Africa and offering them tools to help them to succeed. Our YALI network, the online component that allows us to talk to people virtually, has garnered nearly 130,000 members. And as I said, these were the young people who taught me about WhatsApp and all of these other technologies that you all are using, and we're using that technology to reach these young people. And it's an opportunity for you, too, to reach out to young people on the continent of Africa as well. Through the YALI program, we are reaching out to young people. We're talking with the fellows. We talked to them while they were here in the United States. And whenever I travel to Africa, I take the opportunity to meet with them. And I tell them that they were leaders, as I know you are, and that YALI, the Young African Leaders Initiative, is a tool for leadership. You have this youth network that will be your tool for leadership. So I encourage you to talk to people, including young people from Africa, to better understand their circumstances, to understand what is different about you and what is similar about you. You guys go to amazing schools. You have amazing tools to support you. You have books in your classroom. You have pens and papers. You have opportunities like this. When I was the ambassador to Liberia, I used to drive through the streets of Monrovia at night and see young kids studying under streetlights because they had no electricity at home. They were studying with flashlights because they had no electricity at home. You guys have computers. You have amazing teachers. You have classrooms. You are not studying under a streetlight. You're not studying in the rain in a building that has no roof. You're in buildings like this and you feel the warmth. You're not getting wet because you want to hear a speaker. Young African students from many countries will be in the rain. They would show up in the rain to listen to a speaker, and I even had that opportunity to see thousands of people standing in the rain listening to me, and I decided I would not use my favorite tool and keep them standing in the rain too long, but I appreciated the extent to which they were wanting and desiring to come out and hear someone speak. The last thing I want to suggest to you is that you should be engaged, and you are, because you're here today. By being here today and actively participating in this forum, you are already on your way. Being engaged can take on many forms, but as you move forward and pursue your studies, one way that I hope you will stay engaged with the world is by considering public service as a career, including working at the Department of State. But I also like to say in any foreign affairs agency or any foreign affairs organization across the world. At the Department of State, we need people with all sorts of skills who come with a variety of life experiences and backgrounds. In fact, we're stronger and we do our work better when our diplomatic corps truly represents the diverse backgrounds and experiences of our citizens. You are our young African leaders in the United States, and we want you to use the opportunities you have today to become effective leaders for tomorrow. It may be a few years away, but I want you to keep in the back of your minds this youth forum and what you learn about Africa today. Stay connected with the State Department. You can visit us at careers.state.gov. There are some really exciting things on that website, or you can follow us on Twitter at DOS Careers, D-O-S Careers. You can consider internships at the Department of State, and those are also listed online. And for those of you who will still be in high school, we even have a clerical program that allows high school students to come and work at the Department of State. And you can find out about that at careers.state.gov. And while the positions are called clerical, you get the opportunity to work beside and work with some amazing people. Also, think about joining the Peace Corps. Being a volunteer is excellent preparation for the State Department. If you can handle being a Peace Corps volunteer, you can handle anything we throw at you in the Foreign Service. When I mentioned those Peace Corps volunteers in my hometown that sparked my interest in Africa, what I didn't say was how much I wanted to join the Peace Corps as a result of that opportunity. And I still regret to this day that I did not have that opportunity, but I've had many other amazing opportunities that have enriched me both personally and professionally throughout my life. So today, and in the days and years ahead, I want you to listen closely to the realities, both challenging and inspiring, that exist behind the headlines and underneath the surface. So when you read a headline or one of those Google things pop up on your iPhones that says something terrible is happening in Africa, I want you to go beyond those headlines. Listen more closely to what is happening. I want you to talk to people. Talk to people from different generations with different backgrounds, with different points of view. You're going to meet dozens of new people today. Talk to them. Find out what they are interested in. You have the opportunity to go to school with people from extraordinarily diverse backgrounds. Find out where they are from, where their parents are from. If you know they speak a different language at home, learn that language with them. Have them teach you some words of their language. Let them tell you a bit about their cultures. What I found when I visited a school, a beautiful school in Atlanta called, I think it was called Clark High School, and they had 90 different ethnic groups from across the world attending this high school. And the kids were not talking about where they came from. In fact, when I said that many of the kids were embarrassed to say where they came from, kids nodded their heads. No kid should be embarrassed about where they come from. Every kid should talk about where they come from with tremendous pride and share that. And you should be interested in hearing where people who are from different backgrounds, where they come from. You should be interested in making sure that you find a friend and embrace someone who is totally different from you, completely different background. You want to know who these people are. You want to bring them into your worldview so they understand where you came from and you can share with them where they came from. Be engaged with the world. That's the third recommendation. Remember to look up from your cell phones and embrace opportunities to learn when they are presented to you. Again, talk to the people around you. Washington provides amazing opportunities to meet people from all over the world. You should take advantage of that opportunity. I have to say, I never met an Ambassador Matifu when I was growing up. You all get the opportunity to meet and hear from ambassadors from all over the world. You get to go to school with their children. You get to go to school with children from many different places around the world because Washington is such a cosmopolitan area. So take advantage of those opportunities. Whatever path you take, whether or not it leads you to Africa like mine did, I guarantee that by being engaged with people, by talking to people who are different from you, by listening to them, your life and your journey will be richer and more enjoyable as a result. I hope you have an amazing day today. I hope you have a lot of fun, and I wish all of you the best as you start to determine what you want to do in the futures that you will be mapping out for yourselves starting today. Thank you very much.
You know who this woman is, and you've heard her mentioned by Assistant Secretary Thomas Greenfield, and you have her bio in your program. I'm just going to tell you two things about her. She has a PhD. She was educated at the University of Georgia in the United States. And what you don't know is that she's also one of the longest serving ambassadors in the diplomatic corps, not just the African diplomatic corps. She's contributed a lot to our country. She's negotiated for the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, which is the first free trade agreement for Africa, and she's really been a very good advocate on behalf of her people. The Democratic Republic of Congo is one of the largest countries on the continent of Africa. So please give a warm welcome to Ambassador, Her Excellency Phaida Matifu.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. I'm always happy to address students because I myself am a former teacher, and it's always a pleasure. On behalf of the government of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, on behalf of the group of African ambassadors in Washington, it's a great honor for me to welcome you today. The United States and Africa have enjoyed long-standing and deep historic, cultural, political, economic relations. The United States has been a vital security and development partner for the continent. The U.S. investment and assistance has played a very important role in helping Africans build a future that is much better today. On the other hand, Africa's global influence and importance has become significant to the U.S. strategic national interests. Proactive engagement with Africans in securing peace and stability and promoting sustainable economic and social development are fundamental for the enduring mutual benefits of both Africa and the United States. It's therefore crucial that you, the next generation of leaders, understand the dynamics between the United States and Africa. You need to seize the opportunities. You need to learn a lot about Africa. With its dense forests, its powerful rivers, its abundant natural and mineral resources, its great agricultural potential, its human resources and diverse cultures, Africa is transforming into the new frontier for businesses. It hosts 7 of the 10 fastest growing economies, like Ambassador Thomas Greenfield mentioned, and is really, really on the path of claiming the 21st century. African leaders have introduced reforms to enhance economic performance and to generate economic diversification, create jobs for the youth, and lift millions out of poverty. So as governments, we are committed to the development of long-term strategies aiming at accelerating the socio-economic transformation and harnessing science, technology, and innovation for sustainable development. And to meet the socio-economic development process, Africa is sparing no effort to reinforce intra-Africa cooperation and as well as enhance its partnership with the US. The exchange of experiences and expertise in human and institutional capacity building and development, economic empowerment, and gender equality, as well as the consolidation of academic and vocational training programs are key in this regard. And like you in this room, African youth represent the future of Africa and provide a great opportunity to harness this demographic dividend for the continent. African leaders are devising policies that empower the youth to help them confront the economic challenges of the continent and to become the engine for continental growth and development. Like all African countries, my own country, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, is a country of almost 70 million people. It's the second largest country in Africa after Algeria, where 70% of the population are under the age of 30. The government strategies for sustainable development focus on addressing the needs and aspirations of our youth through well-thought-out programs of action that promise to create an enabling environment to help the youth innovate and to confront challenges of a fast-changing world. In my country, for instance, the government has started a program to give grants to young people who are interested in agriculture. And these grants are given on a competitive basis, just as an example. And we, as African representatives here in Washington, we represent our countries, our leaders, and our people. And for that, we are dedicated to working together with our US partners to highlight and emphasize positive changes taking place in our respective countries and the successes of the African continent. We also talk about the challenges that they present. And of course, it's very, very, very important for us to engage with the US, with US officials, members of Congress, and as this morning, to engage with young Americans, because we believe that they are the next generation of leaders of this country. And as part of a new emphasis on building African economic links with our US partners, we are committed to engage with the United States, the strategic importance of Africa in terms of trade and business. Africa today is far from what it was decades ago. Real progress has been achieved in all areas, including democracy, good governance, health, education, and the economy. The prospect of U.S. business in Africa, of true partnership with the U.S., is now much brighter than it has been in the past. Africa's opportunities are infinite and potential boundless. It is a continent abundantly endowed with nature, with enormous potential. The continent of Africa has emerged from the ashes of a once overlooked continent to become an attractive destination for private equity investment. And I would like to quote the former Prime Minister of India, Mr. Singh, who once said that Africa possesses all the prerequisites to become a major growth pole of the world. The continent of Africa is the next frontier for American businesses, the next frontier for the new generation of leaders of the United States that you represent in this room this morning. As you will learn during workshop sessions, Africa is becoming more and more an important strategic partner for the United States. For the next generation of leaders that you represent in this room today, information is power. Can you repeat that with me? Information is power. Thank you. So the more you know about Africa and the rest of the world, the better you will be prepared to make good decisions that will bring about sustainable peace and security and prosperity in the world. To conclude, I welcome you to this program today. I invite you, on behalf of all African ambassadors in Washington, to visit in big numbers as many African countries as you can, especially my own. I'm going to be selfish this morning. My own, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which is at the heart of Africa. Our doors are wide open to welcome you. From Morocco to South Africa, from Senegal to Kenya, from Cape Verde to Madagascar, I welcome you tomorrow, young leaders, friends, and partners of Africa, to learn more about the African continent, to explore its potential, and to build a foundation for a better world together with the African youth. Thank you.
All right, our next speaker is Dr. Tammy Hultman, co-founder and chief editorial officer of All Africa Global Media, allafrica.com, and director of the All Africa Foundation. Dr. Hultman has reported, edited, consulted, and produced for the BBC, CNN, South African Broadcasting Corporation, National Public Radio, NBC, The Washington Post, The New York Times, and many more platforms. Her prize-winning work includes being executive producer for an NPR series on Africa in the post-Cold War era. Today, she will be talking with us about media and technology in today's world, some of those things that the Assistant Secretary of State was mentioning earlier. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Tammy Hultman.
You've heard that Africa is not a country, and it's larger, though, than you might expect. Ambassador Matifu's country alone is about the size of the whole United States east of the Mississippi River. And you can see there's over 3,000 miles between Guinea and Sierra Leone and Liberia, where there has been Ebola, and Kenya. But a high school teacher in St. Louis recently had to resign because she had visited Kenya, and there was fear that she might spread Ebola in the school when she came back to the U.S. And 2 elementary school children who moved to the United States from Rwanda, which is right next to Kenya, were not allowed to attend school in New Jersey recently for fear they might spread Ebola. But in fact, Kenya and Rwanda, as you can see, are further from Ebola in Africa than the 2 U.S. schools are from the cases that were being treated here in the U.S. in Dallas and New York. That's crazy, right? But it makes a little bit of sense when you know that Africa is still thought of or even referred to, as was mentioned, as a country. And look at all the countries, even the very large ones, including the very large ones that would fit inside Africa. And Africa is so diverse, it ranges from places that really are as hot as the stereotype of Africa to places so cold that it snows even in the middle of summer. So there are a lot of false assumptions about Africa. And views about Africa from outside the continent tend to fall into 2 camps. One is the hand-wringing, Africa is helpless and hopeless, let's help them, let's rescue them, let's save them. You haven't heard much of that this morning, fortunately. And the other, which you also haven't heard much of, although you've heard some of the good things about Africa, which is great, is Africa is rising. It's a place to make money. It doesn't need anything. Doesn't need us, we don't need them. But both views have some truth, but both are profoundly wrong. Africa is the poorest continent, and its levels of poverty and hunger and disease are unacceptable, as Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield said, but it is, as Ambassador Matifu said, also a continent on the move. And a number of countries, as was mentioned, are growing very, very fast at rates several times those of the US economy. African technologies are being used in medical care. There are high-tech labs where young Africans and older ones are working. There are engineers and managers, men and women. This picture I took at an iron ore mine, which began operating in Liberia and still is operating despite Ebola. Liberia was rebuilding after nearly 25 years of war, which would destroy any country, of course. But unless your consumption of media is very specialized, you won't find out much about Africa's technology achievements. This is a site, Ushahidi, which was developed in East Africa. It's a data project that people all over the world are using to share information in emergencies. For example, to reunite families after earthquakes or typhoons. New York State in the United States used it during severe flooding. Motorists could warn other drivers away from places where their vehicles might be swept away and they would be drowned. And that's an African technology that is a gift to the world. Most of you perhaps have mobile phones, but how many of you can use your mobile phones for mobile wallets? How many of you can walk into a restaurant and put your phone on a little machine and pay for your meal, or order a pizza from your phone, or transfer money from yourself to a friend? If you borrowed some money and you owe them money, just put your phones together and transfer money. Well, since 2005, almost a decade, Kenyans have been using their cell phones as mobile wallets, tapping to transfer funds and do all those other things. In fact, over 3/4 of Kenyans use mobile money, including over 70% of people living in rural areas who earn less than $2 a day. Whereas here, of course, mobile money is just getting started. Now, if this were an event in an African capital, I would have been able to play the Pharrell videos and get you up dancing between speakers, but there's no internet in this building. So that couldn't have happened. I did find that there's phone service because I was tweeting. I don't know if any of you are tweeting, but maybe you're not allowed to tweet. But I can assure you, if I were speaking to a gathering of young people in Africa, as I sometimes do, all of them would be tweeting all the fabulous, interesting things that I say. A growing number of young Africans are determined to face their challenges and transform their societies, and they and their children are the future of their countries and the future of media, whatever its changing form. And as you've been told already today, you can be part of that change wherever you are. At All Africa, most of my colleagues are African, working in our African offices, connected by a high-tech virtual newsroom every day to post over 2,000 stories a day from over 100 African media organizations and hundreds of civil society organizations. If you want to see some of the diversity of Africa for yourself, Google the Pharrell Happy, but also go to allafrica.com. Thank you.
Good morning. Is everybody feeling good? Come on, you young guys, you should be feeling good, to be happy to be here today. Well, I just felt like I just walked all the way from Africa right now. So I'm taking my breath. My name is Anna Mwalago, and I'm so happy to be here to talk to you guys and to do my presentation of one poem called I Have a Dream. So how many people are from Africa here? Aha! So can all the Africans say yay, yay? Now can all the African friends say yay, yay? Aha! I'm not getting a big response, but I'm glad that you all know something about Africa. And I always try to start my poem by saying how when I was told I was coming to America, I was like, hey, hey, I am going to the land of milk and honey. Hey! I was excited, I was happy. When I got to America, I was like Queen of Zamunda coming to America. I saw this wonderful land. I said, hey, you know, when I left my country those days, long time ago, you know, our roads were not so wide. They were very narrow, you know. So now here I am in America, the road is big and narrow all over. And you know how we used to cross the roads those days? Now things have changed. You look left, there's no car. You look right, there's no car. Guess what you do? You run and you cross the road. So when I was just about to do that here in America, somebody said, no, ma'am, you have to press the button. I said, what? She said, you have to press the button. I said, what? She said, you have to press. I said, oh, the button. So I pressed the button. All of a sudden I hear, you may now use the walkway. I say, America, even the road is talking to me. Hey! I was excited. I said, this is the land of milk and honey and miracles all together. I remember the first time when my friends took me to Popeyes. I was in paradise. Hey! You know, in my country those days, you only have chicken for Easter and Christmas. Now here, I'm telling you, chicken is pouring, chicken. Ah! I wrote home to my mom. I said, Mommy, if they can allow me, oh, I would send you some chicken. I tell you, every Friday when I got paid, guess where I was? Up until they started calling me the number 2 lady. Because I did used to that. So all of a sudden, you know, now they are telling me I have an accent. Is having an accent a problem? No. Is having an accent a problem? Because if you guys go to some part of Africa, east, west, or north, or south, they're going to say you have an accent. But they're not going to talk to you slowly like you don't understand what's going on. So all of a sudden, I started getting intimidated. I'm like, what's going on? You know? Oh, one day I picked up the phone. I say, hi, can I help you? The lady said, can I speak to somebody who speaks English? I said, hey. I was mad. I was so mad. I said, you know, maybe I need to learn the American accent. So I bought this book called Learning the American Accent. I tried, and the only thing I got right was, what you gonna do? And even that, they told me I was wrong. So you know what I said? I said, you know, I have to love myself. You know, I have to value my culture. I have to be proud of my identity. Because you know what? I cannot try and be American no matter what I do. But I know how to be Kenyan. I know how to be African. So, you know, I started, you know, now sharing with them about my culture. Because some people were asking me, oh, so how did you get to America? I said, well, I took the lion. Then I took the same. I said, I mean, how come you don't understand how wonderful things we have in Africa while I know so much about America? So, you know, I decided, you know, I'm going to educate people about the value of loving yourself, the value of seeing your culture as something that when it comes to the table makes this beautiful and this world a beautiful place. So I'm going to share with you this poem so that as you leave here today, be proud of who you are. Know that whoever you are, it matters, and that you can share your love and your culture with others. As I speak, rhymes flow into my mind, and as I blaze the stage, I hope you will relate and comprehend my linguistic phrases. As I speak, your dialectic phrases into my accentual tongue to bless thee with words of wisdom. I am a victim of discrimination. No, not because I'm black and sure enough I ain't white, but because I am an immigrant, an alien, a foreigner. See, I speak the same words, comprehend the same phrases, but just because my tongue rolls in a different way, that don't mean I'm dumb. And see, yes, comprende English, because I probably speak and know more English than you. See, I'm tired of being labeled, people talking to me slowly like I'm dumb, having some disability of some sort. Shoe. Disability ain't nobody's choosing, but sister, brother, I am fine, 100% sane. Matter of fact, much better than you in many ways than one. I mean, if you cannot say my name right, moi la go, then you have no right to tell me to say water if I know it as water. I mean, what is the meaning of this conversation? And what is the purpose of communication? To drink water or to say water? So, honey child, please, if you have not walked in my shoes, you have no say in my world. And don't you dare command me to walk in your shoes, because I love the smell of my feet, the feel of my shoes, and the history of my life. I mean, have you ever seen a monkey before? I mean, in real life? Do you know what it does? How it jumps? Have you had the pleasure of walking bare feet, feeling the sand tickling your toes? Have you been cramped up in a bus, loaded with people, each talking their own languages but their faces looking so similar? Have you had the pleasure of dancing to the rhythm of the drums and the music of the ululation, making you feel so exhilarated? No. See, you cannot understand, just like I do not understand the Halloween madness, the calling before coming to visit, the biggest sale of the year, the exchange of gifts at Christmas, and the time clock moving forward and backwards. Hey. My ways are not your ways, and your ways cannot be mine. So please do not try to change me, because I have no pleasure in asking you to change, for I love you anyway. Whether Hispanic, African, American, Indian, Asian, we are all God's children. So why can't we relate, love our difference, exterminate our ignorance that is killing us, and bring flavor into this beautiful world? Thank you.